Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to HC Conversations Podcast. I'm Phil.
I'm Paul.
And we're excited to be with you today.
That's right. It's 2024. Happy New Year.
So this is officially the official last day we can say it because it's the 8th. So
Yep.
It's been a week since the 1st.
Yep. This is our first podcast of the new year.
It is. It's true. So
And we are kicking things off.
it's going to be a great year, you guys.
It is.
Fantastic.
We'll talk about that in a video that we're going to shoot later on for social media about the church and what's happening here. So make sure you check that out.
Fun
But we're kicking the year off, continuing in our series that we've been talking about deconstruction or deconversion and why it is that people deconvert. And today we're talking about people deconverting because they left the church because there were errors in the Bible, errors in the New Testament. Constantine changed the Bible.
A secret, dark cabal of powerful men came together in a back room, twirling their mustaches.
White beards.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I left the faith because the Bible told me so. Oh, yeah. Man, I was going to say something there, and I completely forgot what it was. Oh, I know, this is kind of off topic, but the whole powerful men making the Bible thing. If you want to make a book to, like, control people and with power and authority, the Bible ain't the book to do it with. And not unless you're reading it really, really wrong, because through and through it's about, hey, serve others and forgive people, and you should be a servant of all and make yourself last, and Jesus says pick up your cross. I mean, it is not a let me hold this over you to dominate the world.
Right. The Bible subverts authority. That's why it's banned in a lot of communist countries, because they're like, oh, that's bad for us.
It's bad. It's bad for business. You start following Jesus, it's bad for authoritarianism and all kinds of stuff.
And the Roman Empire. It was bad for the Roman Empire.
It was, but guess who won?
Jesus.
The Jesus followers. The Roman Empire is no more, but the church marches on, and it always will. So, the Bible. We got off topic there.
Yes.
It's like right away off topic.
I know. You did it.
I know.
So we're going to be brief today because we've already covered this in several episodes of the podcast and in a Sunday morning sermon. So do you want to mention where people can find those? Yeah,
I'll go ahead and I will link these in the description below. But like Paul said, we're going to be just kind of short overview. But where we went into a little bit more depth, we actually did a podcast episode last January, and it's called Can We Trust the New Testament? That was on January 16th of last year, so you can check that out. I did a Sunday morning message on this idea in our Gospel of John series, because John chapter 8, the woman caught in adultery, there's actually some debate or controversy around, hey, does this belong in this section? Is it original? And so we spent a Sunday morning talking about that. So if you go to our Gospel of John series on the Hope Community YouTube channel, there's a playlist. It's Gospel of John. You're looking for part 23. And then just outside of us, because we are not experts in this area whatsoever, we just distill information and we're just telling you what we've heard. If you look up, or if you're you want to read a book or watch YouTube videos, whatever that looks like, search for Dr. Daniel Wallace. He is like the foremost expert when it comes to what's called biblical textual criticism, looking at all the ancient manuscripts and stuff and determining the reliability and the translations and all those kind of things. Yeah. So search for him. And then finally,
I was going to say, I talked about it in a message that I did over the summer about what we believe about the Bible.
Well, you didn't tell me
I just remembered it while you're talking.
What series was that in?
What We Believe, I think, is what we called it.
Oh, yeah, because we were going through kind of some of like our beliefs as a church. Yeah. So check that out. I'll link that as well, but I don't know what it's called off the top of my head. And the final thing was, if you got like an extra 3 hours, you'd like to really dive deep into this. I mean, maybe you do, and I think it's interesting. But search on YouTube for The Making of the Bible by Dr. Tim Mackie. Dr. Mackie is part of the Bible Project. Very good resource, and he's got like a 3-hour lecture on. He focuses primarily on the Old Testament, and so it's super interesting. So lots of resources that you can go to. But for today, just a taste, just a smidgen, just to wet your whistle.
Oh, I can taste it.
Or just wet your appetite. Isn't that a thing too?
Yeah.
I don't think you wet your appetite though. If you wet your whistle, you.
But it's not W-E-T, like.
Oh, it's wet.
Wet. It's
with an
W-H.
H. Wet.
Just like peak interest is not like a mountain peak. It's P-I-Q-U-E. Peak.
PK.
Pico de Gallo.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Paul, just quickly, why? Oh, why can we trust the Bible? Or maybe not why we can trust the Bible. Let's talk about some of these reasons within I left because of the Bible that maybe need to be rethought.
Well, number one of the things that we mentioned earlier that we were kind of joking about, that the Bible was created by men in a dark back room somewhere in order to control and suppress mainly women, is not true. It makes great fiction. Dan Brown has wrote about it and popularized it in his book, The Da Vinci Code.
It's fiction, people. It's fiction.
It's fiction. It's not history. When men got together, councils got together to talk about the canon, what we call the Bible, they were getting together to agree on books that they already agreed were authoritative.
Yep.
And they were doing it at a time where people that were disciples of the disciples or a disciple of the disciple of the disciples were still alive, when they could be like, no, that's not actually what John said, or that's not what Peter said. And I know Peter actually did write these letters. I know Paul wrote these letters.
Yep.
And so they had a very reliable transmission system that we can be pretty sure that the documents we have are very accurate, that they weren't changed over time, that it wasn't like a game of telephone. And one of the ways that we have that is because of textual criticism, where we look at the number of documents that we have, we look at the differences in the documents, we look at when some of the earliest documents appear, and most of the documents that we have are very, very early. We've got over 25,000 copies, I think, of the New Testament manuscripts alone. That's, whole copies, that's individual fragments,
right.
But they all come together to give us a complete picture of what the New Testament authors actually wrote.
Yeah.
And you compare that to other ancient writings, like Herodotus and the history of Libby's History of Rome.
Yep.
The earliest copies that we have of some of those are hundreds of years later, and we only have a couple copies.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of there's like 3 Greco-Roman historians that have like everything that we know about the ancient Greco-Roman world basically come from these 3.
It's like Herodotus, Thucydides, and Libby's History of Rome.
And it's like they gave like a physical, and I think it's in those other times we talked of like, if you were to stack them up, they have like a stack like the size of this table in terms of ancient works that we are pulling from. But then like the New Testament, we have a stack like the size of the Empire State Building or something ridiculous like that. It's just, and even, non-Christian sources readily admit, and if they don't, they're lying or they don't know what they're talking about, that what we have in the New Testament in terms of like manuscript history, it is a wealth of riches. It is unlike anything else from the ancient world. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you can learn more in some of our other podcasts that we're going to talk about in Tim Mackey's, but most of the so-called errors that you find might be spelling or grammatical things that don't change the meaning of the text.
Absolutely. There are a couple passages that are a little bit bigger that are discrepancies. The big one is there's a longer ending of Mark, and then the woman caught in adultery, and then there's a couple other like really, really small ones here and there. But they change nothing about the actual, not just the meaning of the text, but any kind of historical Christian doctrine. In fact, even Bart Ehrman, who is a critic of the New Testament, he is also a textual critic, but he is an atheist or an agnostic, has even admitted that none of the differences in the manuscripts change core Christian doctrine.
Right.
So we have really, really, really good stuff. And like you said, we have it early, tying it back to really early sources. And so one of the reasons right there why we think you can trust it, and as you alluded to, that it was passed down from the earliest. That kind of also, like, from one generation to the next, there's a direct tie to where we got these books from. And so that kind of also speaks to when people ask, well, what about like the gospel? I've heard about the Gospel of Thomas. Why isn't the Gospel of Thomas a part of the Gospels? Or why aren't these books and works a part of the Gospels? And there's several reasons. One, they're usually much later. Like we can date these things. It's like, this is older. 2, the content is wildly different.
Yes.
Like one of the determinations of what's legit and what isn't is if you have, we've got 26 7?
Yes, 27.
It's like I was saying 26, but I'm like, no, anyway. 27 New Testament documents. If 27 are saying one thing, like these 27, this pile over here, these all communicate the same thing about Jesus and his death and his resurrection, all these things. And then there's this one out here that says, actually, Jesus came from outer space and wasn't crucified. He got hit by a semi-truck. I don't know, something like that. It's like you can pretty safely assume one of these things is not like the other. So that's also one of the tests that's given. And the other test that's given that goes back to those early traditions is like apostolic authorship.
Right.
All of the New Testament writings are tied to tied to the apostles, like either directly from an apostle or associated with an apostle, because there's some question around, Hebrews. Who actually wrote that? We don't really know, but we can tell it's tied to the other works of the apostles in the apostolic age of that first century of eyewitness followers of Jesus. So
right, and there are other writings, other letters that were written by anonymous people that carry on that apostolic tradition.
Yeah.
That while they're not biblical, they teach and they read like an apostle's letter. That's different from the Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah.
The Gospel of Thomas was written by a sect down in Egypt at around 250 AD at a late dating. And then it was lost. It was only discovered in 1945.
Yeah.
And so there was a reason why it was lost. It was lost because it wasn't considered authoritative. Nobody was making copies and circulating this around.
Exactly. That's the thing right there. It's the copies and the circulation. In fact, Paul even says in one of his letters, I don't remember which one it is, like, hey, after you read this, pass it down to the church I think it's the church in Laodicea or whatever. And so that's what the early church did. When they knew, hey, this is from Paul, or this is from John, or this is from Peter, whatever it is, we copy it so we can keep a copy here. We're going to pass it on to the next one, pass it on to the next one. People read the Gospel of Thomas and are like, well, this is garbage. What is this? This isn't. And so it never got copied, never got circulated, which is why it disappeared forever. That's a really, really good point.
Yeah.
I think we've pretty well covered it on that. I mean, like we said, there's a lot more you can go into. Check
Right.
out some of those other videos, some of the other resources.
Constantine changed the Bible.
Yep, he did. Bye, guys. This is crazy. We just kind of discovered this a little bit ago of like, where did that rumor even come from?
Voltaire created that rumor.
Yes. Tell us about what Voltaire said or whatever.
So Voltaire created the rumor, and I don't have French, so I don't speak French, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce
French.
what he said. But basically, he created this false idea, this narrative that when the councils got together, that they stacked up all the books on the altar, and the ones that were not authoritative fell off the altar.
I mean, my French history is not great or existing at all, other than like a little bit of World War I, World War II. When was Voltaire? When? 1500s maybe?
I think he was in 1700s.
Okay.
So he was an Enlightenment thinker.
I was going to say, French Enlightenment is very, very, very anti-Christian. And so there's like a bias there already, and rightfully so. Like the Catholic Church in France throughout the ages had, there was a lot of bloodshed and terror.
Ironically, Voltaire's, he predicted that the Bible would be dead within, I forget how long.
That's right, it's his house.
And now his house is used to print Bibles.
Yes, it's like a museum for like different Bibles and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. But anyway, yes, he came up with that rumor, and that's been circulated. A lot of times, what you hear is like that Constantine changed the Bible, or this adds on to like powerful men in a dark room somewhere, and it happened at the Council of Nicaea, which was in 320.
325.
325. That is not what the Council of Nicaea was about. Council of Nicaea was assembled to deal with the Arian heresy. What is the Arian heresy, Paul?
Well, Arius claimed that Jesus was not actually God.
All right.
He was just a man.
He was just a created being and so an Arianism, it's also Arianism that like sees God of the New Testament and Old Testament as like separate, different deities. Is that Arianism?
I think that might be Marcionism.
That's the one. Yeah, there's been lots. Also, just general church history thing. The councils didn't ever get together to decide like, this is what we're going to believe and this isn't. They came out with those things, but it was always based on there are some people teaching crazy things, like Jesus isn't God, or there were two different gods, or Gnosticism. These different. So they would get together and say, no, here's what we actually believe. Anyway. So they get together to dispel, put an end to Arianism. That's what the Council of Nicaea was. And there's a second Council of Nicaea later. I don't know what they were talking about. We didn't look that up. However, when the canon was established, so the New Testament canon is a Latin word that means something,
standard,
collection,
like a
standard.
ruler. Think of like a ruler.
Like this is the standard. These are the books. That actually happened for the New Testament, not officially until 393. And it unofficially existed before that. In 367, there was a letter written by Athanasius, who was a 4th century bishop in Alexandria, stating these 27 books. And so it was, again, it points to this fact that these books were already widely agreed upon, this is our scripture, by the church globally for several centuries before it was like officially, put in writing.
Right.
And so 367, we see this list pop up from Athanasius. In 393, at the councils of Hippo and Carthage in North Africa, of all places. This actually wasn't like in Rome or wherever the emperor was. That's when canon becomes official. Constantine was already dead at that point.
Yeah, Constantine died in 337.
So the New Testament coming together was a process that went all the way back to the 1st century. And this, I don't remember which one it is. We have almost a complete copy of the Gospel of John. I think it's around 200, which is 100 years before Constantine, and it's got the deity of Jesus all over it. Because that's one of the things, like Jesus wasn't God. Constantine decided to make him God. All of it is a bunch of malarkey.
Ooh, good word.
Yeah. So we have a history that goes back to the apostles. It goes back to John and Peter and Paul, and it was passed on to the next generation and their disciples, and then the next generation and the next generation. It became so widely circulated within the church. These are our scriptures, and we make copies of them, and we pass them around, and everybody knows it, and everybody agrees on it. At the time that you get to the late 4th century, 393, 397, everyone's like, oh yeah, of course, these are our scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just make it official, so there's no question moving forward.
Right.
Because rather than having to have all these councils and stuff all the time deciding these things, like let's just once and for all write it down so people know. And that's a very short how the New Testament came together.
That's right.
That was longer than we thought it was going to be.
I know. But hey, if you want to learn more, go ahead and check out the videos that we mentioned that are linked below. Mm-hmm. And you can do a deep dive if you'd like.
Yeah. Oh, you can go so deep.
But if you left the church because of errors in the Bible, perhaps you left unnecessarily. If you're considering leaving because you heard that old white men got together to...
it was in North Africa.
It was in North Africa.
I really doubt it was old white men.
To figure out how to oppress women with the Bible,
yes,
then perhaps you should reconsider and dig a little bit into history and not the Da Vinci Code, which is fiction.
I think that's a good way to end this one.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this first podcast episode of 2024. We'll be back next month as we continue in our series looking at deconstruction. Have a great month, everybody.